Good afternoon, and thank you, and wow, I am so privileged and so honored to be sharing this afternoon with all of you and these incredibly amazing women that are being honored today.
Selamat siang dan terima kasih. Saya merasa terhormat dan dapat bergabung dengan kalian semua di kesempatan yang luar biasa hari ini.
I'd like to extend my congratulations to each one of you, Octavia, Michelle, Kelly, Patty, and all 50 women that have been included in the Impact Report.
Saya ingin mengucapkan selamat kepada salah satu di antara kalian, Octavia, Michelle, Kylie, Patty, dan 50 orang lainnya yang hadir di sini.
Your achievements not just inspire me, but also so many others to work harder, to be better, and to make a dent wherever we can. So I'm very, very proud to be standing alongside of you.
Pencapaian kalian tidak hanya menginspirasi saya, tapi juga banyak orang yang bekerja keras dan menjadi yang lebih baik, menjadi dokter gigi dimanapun kita bisa. Suatu kebanggaan bisa berada di tengah-tengah kalian.
So in life, there are moments when you stop and ask yourself, how did I get here? Like, why am I standing here? Well, this is definitely one of those moments for me.
Di kehidupan kalian pasti ada saat dimana kalian berhenti mempertanyakan mengapa kalian bisa berdiri di sini, mengapa kalian berada di sini, karena itu juga menjadi suatu pertanyaan besar pada hidup saya.
And I find myself going back to the beginning, back to my roots. I was born to incredible parents, amazing parents who served as doctors in the Indian Army.
Saya kembali mencari diri saya, asal-usul diri saya, di mana orang tua saya adalah pelayan untuk dokter dan tentara India.
I was the firstborn, and as far back as I can remember, I made my parents very proud and happy 99% of the time. Okay, slight exaggerations of personal achievements are allowed from time to time, don't you think?
Saya anak pertama dan saya dapat mengingat bagaimana orang tua saya bangga 99%.
My brother was born a few years later, and even then, nothing changed for me.
Adik saya lahir setahun berikutnya dan itu bahkan tidak merubah saya sedikit pun.
We were both given equal opportunities, and I want to emphasize this. I want to really emphasize this for you because I don't think a lot of people might understand that being equal might seem very normal. But where I come from, India, and a lot of developing countries around the world, more often than not, this is an exception.
Kita berdua mendapat kesetaraan yang sama. Saya ingin menekankan sekali lagi kepada kalian bahwa menjadi setara adalah hal yang normal. Saya berasal dari India, di mana negara berkembang di seluruh dunia dan mengesampingkan kesetaraan.
It's actually a privilege. My first experience of the glaring disparity between boys and girls came at a very, very young age.
Itu adalah hak istimewa, di mana pengalaman pertama saya yang sangat mencolok adalah perbedaan antara laki-laki dan perempuan.
I grew up in a middle-class family. with extremely philanthropic parents who constantly reminded me and my brother how lucky we were and how giving back to those who were less fortunate was not a choice, it was a way of life.
Saya lahir di keluarga kelas menengah, di mana orang tua saya sangat dermawan, selalu menekankan saya betapa beruntungnya kami dan betapa pentingnya memberi kepada mereka yang kurang beruntung bukanlah pilihan, itu adalah cara hidup.
Simple. I was 7 or 8 years old when my parents started taking me on these visits in a traveling clinic to developing communities around and villages around the city that we lived in called Bareilly.
Sangat mudah, ketika saya berumur 7 tahun, saya dibawa oleh orang tua saya kepada klinik keliling dan komunitas bernama Deverly.
We were packed into this ambulance and my parents would provide free medical care to people who couldn't afford it. My job at the age of 8 was assistant pharmacist.
Saya dibawa ke ambulan dan orang tua saya melayani pasien dan saya menjadi asisten apoteker.
So I would count all the medicines, put them in an envelope and give it out to patients, and I really took my job very seriously. Very seriously.
Saya menghitung jumlah obat dan memberikannya kepada pasien dan saya melakukan pekerjaan itu dengan sangat-sangat serius.
But the more I went on these expeditions, the more I began to notice the simplest things that distinguished a boy from a girl or a man from a woman.
Lagi-lagi saya menemukan suatu pengalaman yang sangat simpel, yaitu perbedaan antara perempuan dan laki-laki.
For example, girls were pulled out of school when they hit puberty because they were considered ready for marriage and babies.
Sebagai contoh, perempuan yang putus sekolah menghindari pubertas hanya karena mengesampingkan pernikahan dan memiliki anak.
That's 12 and 13, while boys still enjoyed their childhood. Or basic human rights such as healthcare were denied just because they were women.
Itu berusia 12 dan 13, di mana laki-laki sangat menikmati masa mudanya dan hak asasi manusia seperti kesehatan sangat dikesampingkan karena kita perempuan.
Let's call this whole experience trigger number 1 for me. Fast forward a few years and many triggers in between.
Sebut saja seluruh pengalaman ini pemicu nomor 1 bagi saya beberapa tahun terakhir dan banyak pemicu di antaranya.
Like a producer director, for example, early on in my career, I must have been about 18 or 19, telling me that if I didn't agree to the ridiculous terms or painfully low salary in his movie, that he would just replace me.
Seperti sutradara produser, misalnya di awal karir saya berusia 18 atau 19 tahun, dia mengatakan pada saya bahwa jika saya tidak setuju dengan persyaratan yang konyol atau gaji yang sangat rendah pada filmnya, dia hanya akan menggantikan saya.
Because girls are replaceable in the entertainment business. That was a memorable one.
Karena perempuan dapat digantikan di bisnis hiburan, itu yang berkesan buat saya.
Made me decide to make myself irreplaceable. But I think what really moved the needle for me and ultimately led me to create the Priyanka Chopra Foundation for Health and Education and around the same time partner with UNICEF was an encounter with my housekeeper's daughter.
Membuat saya untuk memutuskan menjadikan diri saya tak tergantikan, tetapi saya pikir apa yang benar-benar menggerakkan bagi saya dan akhirnya membuat yayasan Priyanka Chopra untuk kesehatan, pendidikan, dan memperkenalkan
About 12 years ago, I came home from set early one day and she was sitting in my library reading a book. And she must have been 8 or 9 years old and I knew she loved reading.
Sekitar 12 tahun lalu saya pulang ke rumah untuk lebih awal dan saya melihat dia sedang duduk di perpustakaan saya membaca.
So I asked her, I was like, it's a weekday, why aren't you in school? And she said, oh, I don't go to school anymore. So I went and asked her mother and I said, why isn't she in school?
Saya bertanya, mengapa kamu tidak pergi sekolah? Dan ibunya mengatakan pada saya alasan mengapa dia tidak pergi ke sekolah.
And her mom said that her family couldn't afford to send her and her brothers to school, so they chose the boys.
Dan ibunya mengatakan bahwa dia tidak mampu untuk menyekolahkan keduanya dan dia memilih anak laki-laki untuk disekolahkan.
The reason, she would eventually get married and it would be a waste of money. I was completely blown and it shook me to my core.
Dan mereka akhirnya menikahkan dan itu membuang-buang uang. Saya benar-benar marah dan benar-benar mengguncang saya pada hati saya yang paling dalam.
Eventually I decided to cover the cost of her education so that she could continue to learn, because education is a basic human right.
Akhirnya saya memutuskan untuk membiayai pendidikannya agar dia bisa terus belajar karena pendidikan adalah hak asasi manusia yang paling utama. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.